Hello, my name is David Quick. I'm the Adult Services Coordinator here at DC Public Library. I'm really happy today to host two very special guests from the local Shakespeare Theater Company here in DC, Dr. John Kani and Drew Lichtenberg. We're here in the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, which is our central library here in Chinatown, DC. And I'm really happy to have a conversation about the current production down the street at Shakespeare Theater Company, Kunene and the King. Dr. Kani, Drew, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. A little bit about our guests. Dr. Kani is an activist, playwright, actor from South Africa. If you haven't had the privilege of seeing him live in theater, you may have seen him in Black Panther or heard his voice as Rafiki in the recent Lion King movies. So we're glad to have an esteemed actor like you here today.
Thank you.
Drew Lichtenberg is the dramaturg at the Shakespeare Theater Company. Dr. Kani, I said a little bit about you, which barely scratches the surface of what you've done in your life. Do you want to say anything else about your life and career for our audience?
Well, I don't know. I thought people will Google me.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
No, not. I've had this relationship with the United States of America since 1974. I came over to do a play I had written with Athol Fugard and Winston Johnner, two plays actually, The Island and The Seas Where Banzi is Dead. And then 1975, I won the Tony Award for Best Actor. I got back to South Africa. I was detained by the police. And then together with Winston, we were doing the play in some rural town in a town hall. And the major part of the interrogation actually was a New York Times review of the two plays. You know that those liberal reviews that saw South Africa as a draconian state, saw South Africa as an illegal or illegitimate, oppressing millions of Black people, that was part of the review. Now, the special branch or the police interrogating me, I'm trying to explain, I've got nothing to do with that white guy who wrote the review. I did the play, so I can answer to what he said about me or what he said about the play. It makes me laugh. So, of course, because of massive demonstrations on Broadway, in England, in France, and around the country, both Winston John and I were released. So I always joke and say about the Tony Awards owe me 23 days of my life, which I spent in solitary confinement just for winning a Tony Award.
Amazing. We want to hear a lot more about this part of your career. Drew, do you want to say just a little bit about what you do as a dramaturg and what you want to say about Shakespeare Theater Company?
Well, I should also just say, Dr. John Kani is many things. He's also a very humble man. Yes. And if you open any theater history textbook, if you go to the index and look up agitprop, John Kani will be the name, right? Or protest theater, or anti-apartheid theater. He is one of the names that theater people know, revere, esteem, and in my opinion, one of my duties at the Shakespeare Theater Company is to bring great artists like Dr. Kani to Washington, D.C. to be on our stage. I consider it a huge honor and a landmark and a milestone to have John Kani on our stage, just like it's an honor to have Ralph Fiennes or Matthew Broderick or Hugh Bonneville in our upcoming production of Uncle Vanya, and in some ways even more because of the incomparable legacy that John Kani has, and this new play that he's written, Kunene and the King, which fits into this incredible legacy going back to the island in Sizwe Bansi is Dead, of using the stage to tell these stories about the human experience in the world today.
Absolutely. And what a privilege to work in this part of DC and be right down the street from world-class actors coming to bring these plays. You said a little bit about the current production, Kunene and the King. What else can you tell us about the play and how it came to be?
2019, South Africa was celebrating 25 years of our democracy. And it was such an excitement and buzz just around the country, the fact that we have managed to survive through all the different challenges that the government and the people had. And I was having a conversation with a friend who was a Black guy, very militant and always critical. I said, What are we celebrating in 25 years? Well, he gave me things that, look, from where we come from, we're now in a better place. Yes, we have these challenges. Yes, we also have now become part of the problem instead of continue to remember what the struggle was about, to continue to remember the promises we made to next generations, that we sacrifice our lives, the very existence, so that they would have a better country and a better life. Oh, we laughed about it. And then I met another friend who's an actor. I'd done a couple of plays with him. I just said, hey, what are we celebrating in 25 years? My Lord, he gave me a grocery list of all the failures, almost like South Africa is a failed state. South Africa's black government, the government is as non-racial as possible, but it is still referred to by white South Africans as the black government. And it's always blamed, even if the traffic light doesn't work. The president will get a call that the corner G and what street, that traffic light doesn't work. This has never happened before. During apartheid, the electricity worked, everything worked. You drive around, there's a pothole. Call the government. It's black people that messed up everything. And I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, my Lord, we have two different perspectives of life in my own country. So I decided, just as an experiment, put them in the same room. Let me not talk to them, let them talk together. And that was the original concept, was to write this play about these two men coming from two different, one North Pole, South Pole, and we got 90 minutes. They got to make sense of their lives. They got to see each other, which is important. So I decided to write the play. At first, the idea was that there is this white actor who's going to play King Lear, but he's sick, he's dying, so he needs someone to look after. And as you know, very rich people don't go to hospice. They always bring their help to them. They'll go to nursing agencies and carers. They will even have a theater, operating theater in their own space to be looked after. Now, Lunga, the black guy, in my original one, was one of these lousy actors who's always complaining he's unemployed, he's going to get a job, go to agent, and if he's in a job, he's not behaving well. So I wanted him, his agent said, I got a job for you. You're going to play a nurse. It will be about 3 months at the most. You're going to be paid like, let's say $500 a week. And that's never been paid that kind of money. So he agrees. But then during the play, as they work together, Jack learns about being human and humanity. But he then teaches, Lunga teaches is about humanity, about being a good person, ubuntu, which means humanity. But then again, I thought, okay, no, rewrite. Got Jack as a nurse, but who is like a great theater goer, a lover of this Shakespeare and literature. And he knows Shakespeare from the point of the African view. Because in 1959, I studied Julius Caesar in Xhosa, indigenous, a translation. I remember speaking at the 400th birthday of Shakespeare and said, when I read Julius Caesar in Xhosa, I was moved about the passion, about the whole kind of pathos, the sadness of this character. And then later I read the English version of Shakespeare. I remember John Barton, who's like the guru of theater of Shakespeare. He said, John, it's not the version. It is Shakespeare. Your Xhosa one is the version. I said, no, I didn't make a mistake. I meant, then I read the English version. So that was my kind of experience in writing the play. And suddenly just things fell together.
Yeah.
And it was that time that also we were thinking, what are we celebrating? What are we understanding? I also wanted to measure how have we moved from an ultra-racist country into a non-racial society. Has that been achieved? How far are we? What is democracy in comparison to freedom? Right? And that we must understand. Where I'm standing as a black man in South Africa? Where do I see my movement towards the normal society? There's still a brutal segregation. Soweto is about 20 to 30 kilometers from white Johannesburg. And that's how apartheid segregated the Residential Under Group Areas Act. So now we're looking at 30 years. You would imagine there are no ghettos. You'd imagine there are no townships. You'd imagine there are no areas where poverty speaks to you brutally. And the people who are there are mostly not your color, but black. So how have we then managed to fulfill this dream of a non-racial society? How have we? And for me, as I'm talking, suddenly it strikes in the back of my mind, we are in the Martin Luther Jr., basement library, which is incredible.
Yeah.
That I'm asking, what have we delivered?
Yeah.
The promise to the people. Are we in the promised land where our children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character? And those are the questions I'm asking in Kunene and the King. What can we stand up and say, this we have achieved?
And there's this incredible moment where your character speaks Shakespeare in Xhosa,
Yes.
and then you alternate with Ed Jarrah's character who speaks the Shakespeare in English. And this ripple goes to the audience where they're appreciating Shakespeare in this other language. And it does sound better in Xhosa in that moment, or at least to my ears, it does. And that Shakespearean connection, I think, is one of the things that made it really fascinating for us, because there's so much wisdom about Shakespeare and King Lear in the play. It really is interwoven in this really intricate way with the play. So it's really, for lovers of Shakespeare, it's also a tribute to the power of Shakespeare in whatever language.
I loved every evening, as soon as we finish and do Shakespeare in Xhosa, and the character Jack does it in English, it gets a round of applause.
Yes.
Every day,
And you can feel the audience thinking, that is Shakespeare. Like they recognize it as Shakespeare, just in a different language. It's so wonderful.
Could we get you to do that portion of Julius Caesar in Xhosa right now? Because many people have never heard Shakespeare.
All right. It's friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Zihlobo, maroma, zimamhlaba, dipenindlebe. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Ndize kungcwaba uCaesar, andizanga kumncoma. The evil that men do often is left behind. Inkohlakalo, abantu abayenzayo, isala ngasemva. So let it be with Caesar. Ma kube njalo ke nakuCaesar.
Thank you. Wow. And it is a wonderful play. I'm grateful for the chance to see it. And those discussions about Shakespearean language, obviously, we've touched on that, and that's a huge part of the play. Is there anything else you would say, though, about Shakespeare's writing and the power of that language and what do you think it does?
I remember 1956. My teacher took me for the first time with a group of little students into a library. We've never seen a library. We walked in, it was for whites only. She had to ask a special permission to allow these black kids from the black township just to see what a library looks like. And at the end, we were asked to ask questions. People were asking, if I wanted a book on that, would you get it? If I wanted a book on that, where are the books? I lifted my hand, my teacher told me, I asked, how many words are in this room? It's the words for me. It's the power of the word. It's the responsibility of the speaker to the word. How many times have you been able to pull a word back that fell out of your mouth, that hurt, that destroys, that doesn't build? So we have to take that responsibility when we use the words. In a new democratic world of 2025, we still utter hurting words. We're still very careless with the use of the words. Some of the words expose us as liars or as dishonest. we speak these words without the responsibility that we bear to the truth. So for me, the use of words is the most powerful weapon for change. I chose to stay and not leave South Africa for military training, go to exile, to be a storyteller, to be a writer, because I believed that the same way an AK-47 can liberate South Africa in the struggle, there's another AK-47 that's more powerful, the words. And they then can stay in the minds and change the perception, the thinking of a person. So if a person sees a play and they sit there and they question their own belief prior. I remember when I did Caesar Banzi is Dead, one of this big, wonderful guy who owned huge factories, the white guy, sat in the audience and said he would like to talk to me. So I went and talked to him. He says, I own so many, I employed over 30,000. I've never looked at the passbook. They've never told me how that document was enslaving them. I just thought they work here, we signed that they're employed. But after seeing your play, I called them and I asked in my company, talk about the passbook, talk about apartheid, talk about segregation, because I thought they get paid more than anybody. And this is when, even in the 60s, when the Sullivan principles, that where that American company must apply the same working conditions to workers in the foreign lands as they do in South Africa. The South African got them, told them to piss off. We will continue our policies of master and servant, or you can take your Ford plant out of South Africa. They stayed. Kodak assisted South Africa in developing a pass and passport and ID system that was non-corruptible, non-forgeable. Cannot forge. You cannot mess with it. And then we found out later that Kodak was actually an American company. And you think, my God, they're helping South Africa to enslave me. And then when the news came out, Kodak cut the contract with South Africa. And that's because of the words, because everybody was in prison in the 60s. If you're not in prison, you're dead. If you're not dead, you're in exile. And that's when any form of active protest was banned. But we found a way through the arts, through telling stories, to making people laugh, enjoy the evening, and then walk out with a subliminal message coming underneath. And that was done through words.
Wonderful. This is the third production of Kunene and the King, correct? And the third one that's happened in a capital city, right? It was in London and Johannesburg.
Yes.
What's it like doing it in DC? What are your observations of the DC theater scene?
Let's start, because we opened in England, in Stratford, the home of Shakespeare. And there was this guy from a township in New Brighton, South Africa, with Kunene and the King. It was just sold out. What a reception. But as you do know, that the English will sit and be very quiet. And you will almost imagine, where's everybody? As an actor, you think, oh my God, we're going down. They don't like it. And suddenly, when you take that curtain call, they'll call you back 6 times. They'll call you back 6 times. And then we did it in South Africa. Oh, it was a riot. You have to be careful as an actor. You've got to control your own performance and material. You've got to own it. Otherwise, the audience is running ahead of you. We're talking about a scene, which I'm sure you remember. I'm offering Jack tea. And this white actor, Jack, says, on the cupboard there are cups, but underneath the sink, where all the detergents are, there's a green enamel mug. That's a South African thing. White people will drink in cups, but the boys, the girls, the servants, they buy these mugs. So they never touch with their lips a possible same cup that a black person touched. So that's why the mug. Now, in South Africa, when he said mug, oh my God, because they knew, right? Then when here in DC, I know when there are people who are progressive, who are liberal, people who have a little bit of history of racism, a little bit of understanding what's happening in South Africa. And then as soon as you mention, they only catch it when I come back with the mug, you're right, and say, here's your tea, and I'm with the cup. Then they say, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. Then now we know about the discrimination. But in South Africa, they pick it up like when he mentions it. The audiences, of course, in DC or in here especially, are actively evolved. You feel the leaning forward. You feel the following every nuance and every wave and up and down. They are present. They laugh. They clap in the middle of it, Lord. And they are actively. That has always been described the American audiences as loud and very participating. And if in the same way that if they don't like it, they walk out. The English would stay and just make sure your friend doesn't go. It's quite terrible. But the Americans will tell you during the performance if they really, and we've had an incredible reception. Yes. My Lord, it's been such a beautiful experience. And as I did have when I brought Sizwe Banzi and the island at the Kennedy Center. Is it still called the Kennedy Center?
For now. Yes.
Okay. Today it's still called the Kennedy Center. And we were talking earlier, we could not have predicted what Washington, D.C. would be like in January of 2025 when we chose the show. Theater is always seen differently depending on the context of what's happening in the world outside. And for me personally, going into the rehearsal room with you, with Ed, with Ruben Santiago Hudson, with the whole company was so inspiring. It was such a balm during what's been a really divisive and difficult time. And it's made me think about what we're going through now as a country. Because a lot of the themes that are being expressed about South Africa in the play apply equally to America today. Yeah. So it's really helped me. So thank you, Dr. Kani, for writing the play and doing it here, because I think it's helping our audiences make sense of what's going on.
And for me, working here in Washington, D.C. with Ruben Santiago Hudson and also Ed, Edward Giro. I had to explain for them to understand the inner incredible thoughts that I reserve only for me, my private pain. So they understand why I wrote this play was dealing with me. I was trying to understand forgiveness. I'm trying to understand fair justice. And when I open myself. So if the play I do in South Africa, the audience and the actors are familiar with what we're going through. But to explain it to the rehearsal room, where the origin of the thought was almost like I'm being an inquisition. They're asking me questions. Why did you say that? So then I give a story about that. Why did you mention that incident? Then I have to give a story about that. And I realized, oh my Lord, I'm touching a nerve within me that sometimes brings tears into my eyes, about what happened. I buried my brother who was shot at a funeral reciting a poem. I spent 23 days at one time in detention and being detained all over the time. I survived an assassination with 11 stab wounds and lost an eye. And I ask myself, when I look at what's going on in South Africa now, was it worth it? Was it all worth it? Did I really have to go through? Because I could have been an accountant and had a great time. That's what my mother said. Why can't you do something that doesn't annoy white people? I said, I'm not annoying them, Mama. I'm just telling how I feel, the story of the neighbor, the story of you, So during that process, I know we had a lot of love, but it was like touching the wound again. And I was cautious that I don't scratch too much to make it open and bleed again. But once we got all of it on our feet, it was worth it, because I did not repeat my performance in memory, but in new discovery of the given situation. And the inauguration of January and all what's going on fed beautifully with the reasons I wanted to talk about this.
Thank you. The last thing I wanted to talk about, although I feel like you've already gone here a lot, was just about we're in a library. We're librarians here. We're sitting in the archive in this beautiful building named after Dr. King. We're also in a moment where banning books there's people trying to make that happen in a way that we haven't seen in many years in this country. So those of us who work in libraries are just thinking about how to make sure people have access to books and information and knowledge openly as much as they can. Any thoughts from your career or what you're seeing about the struggle for freedom of expression and access to information and the importance of libraries for actors and activists like you?
In 2003, I wrote a play called Nothing But the Truth, set in a library. That same library I told you about, when I saw in 1956, it was the same library. How then does this place that has all this information serve the community in a changing landscape? What is it? Are we preparing ourselves to have the material and the knowledge and the wisdom that people need desperately? Is it a place of solace, place of safety to walk into a library, take a book and read? Maybe you will find out that you're not the only one exclusively, nor do you have the monopoly to suffer it. I got the rudest shock when I visited Australia, Brisbane, and I was doing a play there, and I was told there are people waiting in the auditorium, 4 of them. And they were telling me, like, if you don't want to see them, don't worry, we can tell them to go. I said, no, I will. They were elders from the Aboriginal community who could not even speak a language, English at all, spoke their dialect. And all they asked, what you show in the play through an interpreter, is it exactly what happens to the Black people, to the African people of South Africa? I said, yes. And they said, may the gods be with you. Then he brought me close. He said, when I breathe out, you breathe in. And when you breathe in, I breathe out. We took breath. And that was the most incredible blessing throughout my life. But what I then realized it made apartheid look like luxury in comparison to what was happening to them. So being here at this incredible building, named after a person, a man we always said in this struggle, Americans, if they are on African-American struggle, if they are on phase 2, we're on phase 1. We see from them how they react, and then we follow that. Of course, there are a lot of South African leaders from the beginning of the 20th century, 19th, came here to study, to America, and then went back through the evangelists and the AME and the churches and all. So we have that interconnectedness across the Atlantic. So being here at the place named about this great man, you feel so proud, that connection. And it still continues with Africa. We will always be responsible for each other. That just all the time. And a library. Do you know how many words are in this building? And each one of those words can change a life.
Well, and it's also true that theater is under assault. You know, you have attacks on drag shows and so-called anti-American propaganda being on stage from our head of government. So just like libraries are under attack, I think theaters are also under attack. We're natural allies.
Yes.
And how many words are said on our stages that have the power to change the world, as you're saying? How important is that? It's literally the most important thing, being in a library or being in a theater.
Art is a reflecting surface, like a mirror, into which the public, the audience, society can look and see themselves. Whenever there's a change, even in government, the artists are the first thermometer that will measure that change. And when that change is becoming more destructive, the artists are the first to rebel. They write song, they do rap music, they paint, they sculpture the feeling, because they are their custodians of honesty. They're the custodians of justice in a society. They are the conscience of a government and the people. That is why that when the government becomes a little more, not conservative, but restrictive, and begins to be like oppressive, the artists suffer. Suddenly you will hear the funding of department has been closed. Because the biggest form of censorship is not banning a play or burning a book. It's not. It's just don't fund the artist. Then the artist dies. When the artist dies, the society has no spokesperson. So that's why governments that begin to be draconian know exactly enemy number one is the artist. You've seen that when there are elections, change of government, the artists are rapping and are singing, are doing all the work. The poets are complimenting. Once that government gets in power, the same artists are now listed in enemy number one, because they will speak the same truth of the previous oppressor and of the new oppressor that has moved into government as a changed government. It is our duty as artists. It is never to be silent, to speak. I hate it when somebody says something and I did not speak. I feel very uncomfortable. There was an opportunity I could have said, no, I don't think like that. But this is, therefore, I know what's going on. Yeah. I could imagine now we're talking about the changes that are taking place. The stroke of a pen. A friend of mine who was became Mr. overnight at the stroke of a pen. A beautiful human being. At a stroke of a pen, South Africa is in a situation now where we could face hundreds, almost thousands, I'm talking about Africa as a continent, through the aid program, the USAID, that you have now canceled. I just wish people, when they put a stroke on a paper and count the number of lives that would be affected, and then count the number of families, count the number of futures that have suddenly been, period. It's done. It may be anger because of X, Y, Z. It may be taking over, trying to create a new great America. But at what cost? That's what we will one day sit down and count the number of the cost of all these actions that have happened. And we would blame ourselves, rightfully so, for never having the guts to stand up and say, no, not in my name.
Well, and I think, not to take away from this point, but one of the more interesting points that I think Kunene and the King, your play, makes, Dr. Kani, is that Shakespeare himself is that voice of the artist speaking truth. And that in South Africa, they took away Shakespeare, the apartheid government. Yes. They did not teach Shakespeare in schools, right? And he was seen as the culture of the white minority, but Shakespeare also had this appeal, also had this power to speak to the people who were engaged in the struggle, like the prisoners on Robben Island, who had a copy of Shakespeare's works that they circulated among themselves, that Shakespeare has the power to speak that truth.
It is called the Robben Island Bible.
Do you know this story, David?
Yeah. It was circulated. And then, of course, look, the idea that Shakespeare should be dropped from the syllabus of all schools was really, the people just rose. This is one time everybody said, no, we've been isolated from the entire world. You can't isolate us to even good literature. So this academic stood up and said no. So even the thought was sort of got rid of immediately, because the people understood. Shakespeare, I was once accused of always writing protest theater. Why can't you write a nice story? I said, well, I could do Cinderella, except that the prince would be black. Yes, I could do anything. And then, of course, and then the point is that Shakespeare was also a voice of protest. In Hamlet, for instance, Hamlet suspects the uncle to have killed his father, but he hasn't got the facts, he hasn't got testimony and enough evidence to prove that. He meets a troupe of actors. He says to them, I'm going to work with you. I want you to present a scene which is identical to how I know my uncle killed my father. Right? Therefore, I will watch the king as he watches the play. So the play was a political statement, which was the murder, assassination by the government of a citizen. And when the play happens and Claudius goes, lights, put the lights on, silence. The play is the thing wherein the conscience of the king.
Yeah.
That is it. So I was telling this guy that even in this 15th, 16th, 17th century, art was used to ask questions. Art is never complementary to what's going on. What's going on is people must make speeches, is when things go wrong, that art is forced to comment.
Yeah.
These young people I see now, man, this rap and hip hop and all, I can see the pain. I can see them. They're talking about the dollar, but I see the facade is, I'm happy. But why then do they come off stage and take a tranquilizer? Because that smile hurts when you know the pain is deeper inside. So even every art form, everything speaks about the human condition.
Absolutely. We could talk about this all day. This has been a real pleasure and privilege. Thank you for continuing to make art. Thank you for that. And thank you for bringing it to DC, both of you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes.
Thank you, David.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And
Appreciate
thank
your
you,
time today. Thank
MLK
you, Drew.
Library.
Thank you, Dr. Kani. Thank you, everybody.